All right. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us at our Google Hangout on Air with Chad Sansing from Mozilla.
And now
Today
we're
we're going to be
live.
talking
I guess
about
you're
making and
broadcasting.
breaking the code. So he's going to tell us a little about Mozilla software and some of the great things that they're doing over there. As we go along, on the right side, you have an option to ask questions. We definitely encourage you to ask any questions you have, and hopefully we can get those answered. So a couple people that are joining us today is Michael Flinchbaugh, and he'll be able to introduce himself.
Hey, I'm Mike Flinchbaugh. I'm an instructional coach at Rose High School, and I've been working with Tar River Writing Project for a bunch of years, and then on this Intersections project for the past couple of years.
Excellent. And then we have Danielle.
Hi, my name is Danielle Lewis. I teach 7th grade at Centennial Campus Magnet Middle School in Raleigh. I have been with Charter Writing Project for many years as well, and I'm a partner on the Intersections project. And I have some of my 7th grade language arts students in the class with me. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
I'm not going to broadcast faces because they are under 13.
And we have Chad. Tell us a little about yourself, Chad.
Hey, thank you for having me. My name is Chad Sansing, and I work as a curriculum developer for web literacy with the Mozilla Foundation. And some kind of maybe the top line bullets of what I do. I write teaching and learning materials for web literacy and other projects to help youth and young adults learn how to read, write, and participate on the web. I collaborate and consult with other teams who are working on learning materials, like if they have a need for a lesson or they have an activity that they want to try in one of their events. I try to help out there wherever I can. I also co-facilitate face-to-face web literacy trainings for educators as well as students. I co-host something called the Mozilla Curriculum Workshop, which is a new community engagement kind of comms channel we put together, in which invited guests and co-hosts kind of rapidly prototype teaching and learning materials on a specific topic, while the audience also contributes via shared docs and chat and things like that. I used to be a middle school teacher. I was a middle school teacher for 14 years and taught language arts, social studies, technology, a little bit of admin here and there. And occasionally I'll post something on a blog, either on the Webmaker blog or my own blog, or contribute a piece to the school library journal about working with technology in the classroom.
For the make cycle.
Perfect. Thank you, Chad.
Okay.
So as we go along, I think we have some people that already had questions ahead of time, and I think Mike has access to some of those, and then we'll have questions on the side. But kind of to give you an idea, what we're doing is part of our make cycle for the last couple weeks has been kind of looking at, first we looked at DNA code and how we code life, and now we're looking at kind of the coding of the internet. And so we have had students and participants do several activities where they look at the language that we use for computer coding, what that might look like as far as how that relates to you, and then we've also used some of your great platforms to put together some different poems and other combinations with literacy that the students have been posting to our Google Plus community. And I've already seen some really amazing stuff, and really the students and participants you could tell have gotten really excited about using some of these kind of hacking activities to introduce literacy into some of the topics that we've been talking about. So my question is to you, how did you guys come up with, or what was the idea for having something like Mozilla Thimble and some of these other, like Mozilla Goggles, as a way to get students interested in internet coding and computer literacy?
Gotcha. Well, the origins of those projects kind of predate my working for Mozilla, but maybe not my involvement in the volunteer community. And both the Goggles and Thimble have had recent kind of refreshes and relaunches, and I think are much more kind of robust now. But the big idea behind both of those tools is to give anybody who comes to the web a way to remix what they're seeing, a way to read what they're seeing kind of underneath the hood, to see the code, but not just see it like you might in looking at a page's source code, but to interact with it, to change it, and to change it live. So Goggles lets you do that by creating its own kind of locally stored version of the web page for you to explore, and you mouse over different parts, and they light up with different colors. And if you click on them, you can edit them, you can change them, and see those changes reflected immediately in your own version of the web page in your browser. In Thimble, probably maybe it steps out, takes a step backwards, and looks a little bit big picture. You might look at the code for an entire web page all at once instead of just part of it. But it's the same idea. You can go in, you can mess with the code, you can see your changes reflected immediately in a preview pane right next to the coding pane. So it's kind of like there are two windows. You can look at the code, you look at the page itself, and see how they relate to one another. And empowering people, giving them a sense of agency and ownership over what they're seeing on the web, and helping them understand how to develop their own content for the web. Those are the goals of those platforms, right? To put the users in control of their online experiences.
Great, thank you. And then, Mike, do you want to share some of the questions that we've had from other people who aren't able to join us today?
I keep forgetting about my microphone. Yeah, I can chime in with a couple of the questions. So one person had asked, just kind of, so we actually haven't gotten started, or most of our classrooms haven't gotten started with the X-ray goggles and Thimble. Some have. So this is kind of kicking off getting them into those programs this week. So we were kind of wondering, do you have some tips, some pointers for teachers or students that might help us have a good positive start with those programs?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll also point out in the chat for the Hangout, I shared a link to an Etherpad, an open source shared document on which I've kind of responded to a few of those questions. So that might help with note taking or sharing content from the call later on. So feel free to use that link. In terms of beginning with the web X-ray goggles, which I think is a great place to start, the refresh of that tool at goggles.mozilla.org now has linked to it a first-time user experience that I think is very kind of charming. You install the goggles, you click on the link to the first-time user experience, and then pop-up windows take you through a brief tutorial helping you kind of swap out images. And there's an animal there made of 3 images, a head, a body, and feet. And so as you learn to swap those out, you can combine them all and make kind of a dinosaur with a dinosaur head, body, and feet. Or you could, have a bird head on a fox body with dinosaur feet. Or if you look at the code and you're feeling a little ambitious, you can figure out in pretty short order how to stack 3 different heads on top of each other. It's a great introduction to the basics of using the tool, mousing over elements on the web page, editing what's inside them, and seeing the results immediately. I do think it's important in that kind of first step right before that experience, you want to make sure you've helped your group install the goggles, which is really just about dragging the bookmark that makes the goggles active up into the bookmark bar of your browser. Some people don't have that bookmark bar visible yet, and so they might need help setting that up. It's probably good, especially if you're working with learners over the age of 13, to have people make their own webmaker accounts beforehand, so when it comes time to save, that's an easy process. It's good to make maybe a class account or a few class accounts beforehand if you're working with younger learners, and to think about how to use that really in a structured educational way. Some web pages, also it's good to be aware, some web pages block JavaScript, and the web X-ray goggles are like a JavaScript bookmarklet. They're a little script that functions from the bookmark bar. So you will run into a page now and again that just blocks JavaScript. And the goggles won't work, but it's not your fault, and it's not the computer's fault. It just happens sometimes. Those pages are typically preventing people from using JavaScript to keep themselves safe from certain types of attacks online. Once in a while, just switching your browser will resolve an issue too. So a good first step in troubleshooting is to switch browsers, reinstall the goggles, and see if they work in a different browser for you if they don't work in the first. And you can also, you can use the goggles, you can use that first time experience, but you can also, if you decide on a page to use beforehand with everyone, you can structure something like a goggles scavenger hunt and kind of take the class through, all right, now mouse over the page until you find something that has the P for paragraph element. Next step, find something with an H1 or an H2 element. That's a header, like a title on the page. And you can take people through kind of step by step just to get their feet wet, so to speak, in how Goggles lets you mouse over the page, identify particular elements in the code, and then change them.
Nice. Danielle had actually posted a couple questions about kind of what's really going on there when we use X-ray goggles or do like the remixing with Thimble. Danielle, do you want to ask those questions?
Sure. Let's see. And you've already kind of covered this a little bit, Chad, but I wanted to make sure that my students understood that when they're working in X-ray goggles and they're altering that local copy of their whatever site they've chosen to work on, that they're not actually maliciously hacking anything, that they're just altering a copy and not not doing any harm. And you've already talked about the fact that this is really beneficial because students are able to go in and learn through the process of remixing. But could you explain super quick about what it is that they're actually altering?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So, the web browser, whatever browser you use, gets access to your computer's memory. That's how it runs stuff inside of itself, like videos or songs or whatnot. So when you use the goggles, your browser is using some of its memory to store a local copy of the page. So what you are editing and what you are changing is a version that lives just on your computer and the memory of your browser. It's no longer the real page. You're not changing that at all. In fact, you can't change that from goggles. It's not what the tool does. When you save the page using like a webmaker account, that page is stored on a Mozilla server. And the web address you get for that page is very recognizably different from the original web address. So for example, if you were to like go and remix something called like shoes.com, the web address of your remix will look nothing like that. It'll be like cloudfront.net/ds blah, 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 blah. It'll be very, very clear that your work is a new work. It's a different work. As I said, there's no way to like actually hack the source code of a web page from goggles. That local copy is all you're changing. And when you save, not only do you get that unique address, but it's going to go to a Mozilla server. It doesn't interact with the server, the home of the original page, at all. If you then go in and like look at a list of everything you've done using some of the tools like goggles, and you click on a page that you've remixed, when it displays at the top, there'll be a new header that says, this page is a remix of. It's very clearly marked as a remix. And otherwise, the rules of fair use apply. So I'm sure that you've talked with a teacher or a school librarian about fair use and when is it right to take somebody else's work, remix it, change it. What do you have to do to kind of prove that you've created something new out of something that already exists? So if you're using the goggles for something that's educational, like teaching and learning in school, or you're using it for criticism, as part of maybe an analytical reading assignment, or if you're using it for satire, if you're using humor as your tool for analysis and criticism, you're protected by fair use just like anything else. It's really a great tool for fair use remix, and in the way it's put together, the way it operates, and the way it saves and shares your work, very clear that it's a remix that is not the original.
Cool. That makes that really clear. Thanks.
So Chad, so I know we kind of got involved with this because I think some of our members of the group had met with you and I think talked to you about some of the activities. Where would we direct other people who are interested, teachers, students, to learn more about some of the tools you guys have and really get hands-on with it? Where would be the best place to send them?
Yeah. So the best place is teach.mozilla.org. And that's the landing page for our teaching and learning materials. And in the left navigation, you'll be able to find your way to several different pieces that can kind of help you as a teacher or learner make sense of the web. We've recently launched version 2.0 of our web literacy map. It talks about different skills that you might develop in reading, writing, and participating online. It does so through an interactive graphic display that also links you out to the activities you could do to practice those skills. It's pretty great. There are web literacy teaching activities on another tab of that page, simply called Activities. And these also connect to the web literacy map, but you can kind of look at them separately if you want. They're arranged into modules or into units, and you can kind of pick and choose between those, or you could follow an entire unit to really take kind of a deeper dive into web literacy basics, or we've started posting materials on intermediate web literacy and CSS, the styling language of the web.
Yeah.
There's also a tab there for community engagement. The Mozilla Curriculum Workshop and our curriculum calls and our tweet chats are all findable and discoverable through that. You can get to the goggles and thimble, digging through the nav elements on that page. And I would also say if you go to the Opportunities for Leadership section, you can learn about Mozilla Clubs, which is an entire support network for teachers and out-of-school educators who want to teach web literacy as part of what they do.
All right, great. And I think I might be able to screen share that really quick and kind of look at what we were able to look at here. So maybe you guys can see that. We have the screen here where he was talking about you can kind of navigate through some of the tools and look at some of the other opportunities. I see that you guys are also on social media, so I imagine there's a lot of ways to connect with other people who are using some of these tools to do some of these activities. So we definitely recommend checking out teach.mozilla.org to learn more about some of these options that you guys have. All right. I'm not sure. I don't see any questions coming from anyone watching. Did we have any other questions, Mike, from participants?
We do, but actually I had something that I wanted to ask about, and this is just kind of, I guess, total teacher question. We're always looking for ideas and everything. So I wondered if there were some things that have been like your favorites that you've seen other people do with X-ray goggles or Thimble or any of the tools that Mozilla offers.
Gotcha. So on teach.mozilla.org/activities, the teaching and learning activities page, in the Web Literacy Basics 1 module, there's a very popular activity called Hack the News that makes use of Web X-ray goggles and is a great next step after the first-time user experience. So Hack the News is definitely a winner in that regard. In the same unit, there's a lesson called Ping Pong that's really about the mechanics of how the internet works and how information moves across the net. And that's kind of a fascinating topic and one we often don't think about or necessarily teach or take the time to learn. But that activity has some participatory get up and do some improv skit kind of stuff that has proven to be pretty fun and pretty durable and useful across different kinds of audiences. So Ping Pong is great in that unit. Hack the News is great. Off the Thimble front page, thimble.mozilla.org, one of the 6 activities at the bottom is a homework excuse generator. That one, again, generally works pretty well across audiences. It allows a lot of room for humor and personal expression, and that's definitely something that we try to instill in our trainings and our curriculum, and however we can, right? Like the web is it's not just about mastering a piece of technology or a programming language. It's really about finding ways to problem solve and express yourself on the web as well as in real life. That's why we're doing it. Let me see, what else would I recommend? There are a number of activities kind of further down the page that are community contributed that are pretty great. Mouse, which is a student kind of technology leadership organization, has materials on that page. For younger learners, there's a tool from Japan called Para, which is an animation platform that you can use online. That has been really popular with younger learners. And then as you work through the different modules, I think you'll find certain things that speak to different kinds of learners. There are some lessons that are totally about like the weird web, like how do you decorate or style a page so it's really, you know, flashy in that kind of 90s web page kind of way. And some learners just love that. They love harkening back to that. Whereas other learners are really invested in things that might teach them more about manipulating images, right? Things like that. So off the top of my head, I would say Ping Pong, Hack the News, the Homework Excuse Generator, community-based, community-generated activities like Para, and then just kind of testing and messing around and using different activities to see what works for your learners.
Nice. I just want to share because it was fun. My son and I hacked the random homework excuse generator, but made it a name generator, and we just put in random names, so it made it like a first and last name, and we used it to name some the toys that our students at Rose had made for some toy hacking.
Oh, cool.
So it was amusing, and then we also use it to amuse ourselves during faculty meetings. And
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like a great use case.
Okay, I think I got an email from Stephanie that maybe a couple people wanted to jump on. We'll see if anybody's watching from out there in the Webiverse. Definitely you can use the chat feature to ask questions or the Q&A feature on the side, and see if you have any other questions for Chad. With Chad Sansing from Mozilla, and he's talking about some of the making the web tools that Mozilla has for people to learn a little bit more about how we code and computer literacy. All right, let's see here. All right, looks like we have one viewer. I'm going to see if we have any things in the chat here. All right, any other questions from Danielle or Mike?
I don't have any questions. I've got a bunch of kids in here right now who are playing around with X-ray goggles and Thimble. Going to get them to share a little bit of feedback with the Hangout in a couple of minutes. They're still playing. They're just busily clicking away.
Perfect. Okay. So Chad, like, what do you think is like? We've seen in the news recently like a big push in computer literacy in general and computer coding, and we're seeing this kind of spread throughout, talking about trying to push this into a basic curriculum for students. As we know, a lot of students, very few have access to the internet, let alone home computers. And so we're seeing this as trying to get this more into like the school setting, especially public school. What efforts do you think teachers can make to kind of help this, or do you guys have any materials through Mozilla to kind of help kind of get this awareness out about computer coding, starting with like especially younger students?
Yeah, so many of our tools in our kind of terms of service are geared towards that 13 and older demographic, but we very much believe in face-to-face convenings and gatherings and bringing communities together and doing things that are fun, sometimes game-like, participatory, makery, when we meet. And we try to design our lessons and our activities to reflect that. So in the different modules on the activities page, for example, there's almost always, I can't really think of a case where there's not some kind of activity beforehand where teachers and students are working together to do some kind of performance or to create something that carries through the idea of what's going to be learned in the more technical part of the lesson. So we're all about using participatory learning ahead of time to get people up, to get them active, and to concretize for themselves through making what it is they're going to be kind of abstracting and doing on the computer later on. We think providing people with that kind of opportunity to make meaning, to make personal meaning before they go and encounter the technology is just key. It's just crucial, vital, important, helps out later on. And so what that means is in almost all of our lessons, as I said, we have activities that you can do to teach computational thinking or to teach problem solving, collaboration, communication, creativity offline. So equity and access are huge issues that we need to tackle and solve. And as we're doing that, we also have these activities where even if you can't get everyone on a machine to do the second part of a lesson, or maybe most of the class can't, there's still that first part where you can be creating something that embodies the idea of what's going to happen later on with the technology. And so I think that's a place to start. We talk about no-fi, low-fi, and hi-fi settings. So places, a hi-fi setting would be maybe a school with an abundance of laptop carts or labs or one-to-one initiatives, something where technology is not so much the access to that technology is not so much the issue. We think about lo-fi, where maybe there are a few devices, and we think about no-fi, where there's really not access necessarily to the devices or to the internet itself. And in those places, that's where that's what we hope that all of our offline activities are of use in those places and teaching the same kinds of ideas and processes and problem-solving strategies.
So you were talking about the kind of the benefit of kind of having people together and working through these things. One of the things that I noticed, even with when students are like using Thimble or whatever, the benefit of having them in a common space, as opposed to even like sharing their work on Google Plus or social media of some sort. In a common space, I feel like students push each other farther just by virtue of play. So a lot of the stuff that we'll see students do with like a thimble remix will be somewhat cursory. They'll put in an image, they'll write text, but they won't venture into the CSS tab and mess with the background color or fonts or that sort of thing, so that being in that common space where one kid discovers that you can put in a background or go and find colors so that your fonts pop out, that sort of thing, just is really, really cool. When they catch on to each other like that.
Yeah, and that's a great benefit of maybe the classroom setting, because you can approximate that online. There are tons of open and collaborative practices and projects online, but it takes a while to figure out how to navigate those and to find those and to contribute to those. So, and even then, having people involved in those projects comes together just adds kind of a personal dimension, and like you said, a playful dimension, oh, come over here and check this out, an immediate dimension to discoveries in the work. So that's one of my favorite things about teaching coding and composing for the web in the classroom, is seeing exactly what you described. Someone's like, oh, I just got to do this, and then it just spreads like wildfire across the room. I would say that, a lot of times students are kind of reticent to go into things that look maybe completely alien. Like CSS looks a lot different than a web page where you can at least kind of recognize where the paragraphs are, where the text is. Your first experience with CSS is a little different. But it's also an opportunity to like break the page, right? And so sometimes making sure everyone feels permission to break the page can be really liberating for learning new things too. So that's another way to frame it, right? Messing with the code, breaking the page, go into the CSS, change some numbers, make them crazy, see what happens. There's always an undo button, and you never know what you're going to discover or learn or surface for yourself just by playing around.
Okay, we have someone from out there in the Webiverse. Dalton has joined us, and he wanted to get a little bit of an update on what we've been talking about. So welcome, Dalton. We've been talking about Mozilla. So we're here with Chad Sansing, who's kind of like an expert on all the different Mozilla tools that they have that are open source that the public can use to learn about computer coding. And so he was talking a little about how you can access those, and we have a website featured in the chat box if you would like to go to that, and it tells you a little about some of the activities that you can do to learn more about computer coding, computer literacy, and these can be high tech with a computer or low tech or no tech, right? So learning about this even if you don't have necessarily the technology tools to do that. So welcome. If you have any more questions, feel free to put those in the question box or the chat box, and we'll be glad to answer them. So my question for Chad is, what got you interested in computer coding and doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so many years ago, my wife, she's still involved in the world of kind of digital humanities and digital libraries, but way back in the day, she was a researcher and project manager of different digital humanities projects when I first kind of got to know her. And I wanted to keep up, so I started learning about blogging and using HTML to change blogging templates and the layout of web pages, and kind of got into it in kind of a surface way. I was by no means like a front-end developer or back-end developer. I wasn't like a web developer of any sort. I was just like, this is really cool, and I'm enjoying learning about it. So let's see, how many nested tables I can make in my blog, which was the thing to do back in the late 90s. And then after kind of grad school and getting into teaching, I was still interested in using technology in the classroom, but kind of moved away from web development and was looking more at the trends of the time, which, as I remember them, were things like PowerPoint and smartboards, things that, given more hindsight, I wish I could have done more with at the time. But as I went through my career and kind of saw more of how school actually functioned and what the inequities in it were, I just thought, you should do more meaningful work with technology in the classroom and make it a part of what's happening in different content areas and make it an interdisciplinary bridge between content areas. So I started paying attention more to what people were doing, and I got back into blogging, into social media, around the same time that I reconnected with folks from the National Writing Project, with which I'd been out of touch for a few years after initially going through Summer Institute and serving as a teacher consultant locally for a little while. And there was just kind of this perfect storm of wanting to contribute to the writing project again, wanting to do more with technology more meaningfully in my classroom, and people at the writing project introducing me to people at Mozilla with whom they were kind of starting a relationship to see how the organizations could help each other with composing for the web. Like writing on the web is something that both organizations are really interested in. So I was invited to a few of those early conversations and convenings, and was just really, really inspired to do more work with open technology in the classroom, and to make sure that every student I saw, even if they weren't going into like a technology job, would be able to understand the technology in their job and in their life.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of us, you start tinkering, right? And you kind of get excited about things, and you see where you can go with it. And that's what's so fun about the Mozilla tools, is you can really get in there and like 3 hours have passed and you're still like playing around with something and creating all this stuff. Now, one of the things that part of Intersections does is the concept of bringing science, which is like my background, with literacy. Would you recommend, or were there any maybe books or stories or anything that kind of inspired you, or you got excited about regarding computer coding or computer literacy that you could recommend that teachers could maybe have students recommend as reading that students could do?
That's a great question. I feel like there is more now than there was then. Like, there are many different activity books and kind of guidebooks to learning emergent open source technologies, not just web technologies, but things like Arduino and other microprocessor boards. So while there's not like a particular product or book that I'd recommend, I would say now's a great time to go out there and to look at what's available for helping people learn how to code for the web, or to code for Arduino or another open source board. There are kits, there are books, there's just a lot out right now. It's almost like a mini version of the explosion of young adult literature. It's a good time to go looking, because I think you'll find something that either speaks to you or speaks to your students. It's a great opportunity to work with local or school librarians in developing a collection. And that kind of exploration is something that I would wholeheartedly encourage, along with maybe some of the stuff that helps make it visible, especially quickly, things you can learn to use quickly to rapidly kind of prototype things and to see how computational thinking works. Yeah, like I said, just lots of kits out there now. I hesitate to say, everybody go get this one, but it's a great time to look around for those things.
Oh no, yeah, that totally makes sense. I know, like, one of my things I was thinking about was when I was like, in third grade, we definitely didn't have books about like necessarily computer coding in our library. We maybe had like, what is a computer? And I remember being in like, I don't know if they still make students take like typing class, but I had like a typing class, and we like would play around with like GeoCities, like a website you could like build your stuff. I don't know if you guys remember that, but that was kind of like my first introduction to building your own little like website that you can play around with HTML and have things kind of move across the screen, or you could have like some kind of moving graphic. And so I think about how far we've come now, and I think it's really amazing that it is a lot more open, but I think doing activities like this really continues to make it more open, and maybe eventually more mainstream as far as the type of how the subject matter of curriculum that's taught even in the school system. And so that definitely is really great to have those types of tools out there for people to access, especially being open source, which I think is really important about Mozilla, is that it is free and you don't have to pay for it.
Yep.
And it looks like we have maybe Rob joined. I'm not sure if he's going to talk, but Rob Puckett, who's also a part of our Intersections group, is here. So he can, if he has something to say, he can talk up. But anything else from anyone else? I don't see any questions from viewers. Yeah.
I'm trying to get some students to. They're saying that they're having a really great time. And they're learning a lot, and it's cool to be able to manipulate things that they feel like, they don't necessarily always have access to. Do you want to talk about what you were doing for a second, Najir? Yes? No?
Maybe.
He's hacking the school website, so.
As you go through each lesson, both the kind of physical face-to-face parts and the technical parts, it's great. You begin to see like genres and tropes that come up. So the hack the school website is very popular. The hack your college team's rival website is very popular. And then we have some face-to-face activities where there are what I consider to be like, there's always like, for one activity, there's always this one team that's the confetti team, and things pop up as you work with these more and more that you can kind of anticipate and play off of.
So, could I get Kim? So I want Kim to speak just for a second, because I've got students who have, I've got 5 students in here, and I would say a couple of them at least are pretty knowledgeable about coding. They go into, what's it called, Najir? They go into the inspect element feature on the computers, alter content.
Yep.
But Najir was saying earlier that he liked the thimble aspect of things because, and the X-ray goggles, because you could see the individual pieces, and you were able to save whatever you've done and share it with people, whereas you can't do that on the inspect element. But Kimberly was saying a few minutes ago you were having a hard time, right? Okay, and this was new to her. Manipulating the code, looking at the code was new to her. But how do you feel about it? How do you feel about it now? You don't have to get your faces in the cameras, but just talk.
My mom won't care. Actually, I still don't know how to do it. Ashlyn, who was doing it all.
So they're working collaboratively, and Ashlyn behind me is helping Kimberly to kind of understand a little bit more about what she's actually doing and how to change commands and all that. So they've been working together.
Good.
And the guys back here, they're just running amok and going crazy. Yeah. I think they've done like 3 or 4 different projects in the space of us being here. So guys, could you speak to the ease of use of these tools? I mean, is it relatively easy?
It's literally just like hitting a plug-in.
Literally just hit a plug-in and you feel pretty comfortable with it, and you feel like it's fun and you're learning how to change this content. Okay. Does anybody want to say anything else?
I think
we'll share poems by these guys when we work on the message to the world and the public symbol. So we'll share their stuff when they get done with those.
Very cool. I think the collaborative aspect of coding is something that needs more attention and unpacking in schools, because very often it's easy to kind of go back to the traditional mode where everyone is expected to kind of do their own thing, and if you get too much help here, too much help there, depending on who's judging that, copying or plagiarism, and with coding and the way that the coding community works, you learn, you figure out how to write code that works from looking at other code. It's like the ultimate mentor text. And it's not that coders run, rampant over each other's rights or don't give credit. It's just that when they do go and find something that works and they can bring it into what they're working on and make it fit and make it, kind of complement what it is they want to do, they do give credit. So I would love to see kind of learning to code usher in a new kind of collaborative paradigm in many classrooms, where it's not so much what you remember or produce on your own, but how well you problem solve in community, and then kind of give credit for and respect the authorship of others.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. And one of the other things I had to ask you is when we were talking about and kind of brainstorming, we brought up about, like, we kind of went back and forth about the title of hacking the web and things like that, because sometimes hacking has like a bad connotation or some type of like, I guess, negativity to it, or dangerous, and that could be alluring to students or not alluring. So could you speak a little bit more about maybe just some of the computer jargon and ways that Mozilla is maybe rethinking some of those concepts like hacking?
Yeah, I think hacking like making is a term that got really big over the past few years and encompasses a lot of things. So when you hack on something, it's possible to be like a black hat criminal hacker going after people's information and whatnot. But now it's also possible to, like, I don't know, I hacked my pantry door so it opens more easily now or something, right? It's just about taking something that you own and making it more open or customizable by you as the owner. Nevertheless, as big as that term has gotten and as encompassing as it's gotten, it still has a lot of negative connotation for people. And so we talk a lot about kind of like the project, even more so sometimes now than remix or hack. We'll talk about, next up we're going to try this Thimble project, and the Thimble project is going to teach us to change or edit or revise. Because in other countries and communities too, even something like remix implies that, you didn't create it yourself, and there's some negativity there. So we're paying attention to not just what's happening in the kind of the U.S. education scene and the kind of lingering connotation of hacking, but we're kind of looking worldwide and seeing, what does the audience use, what do our users use, and really focusing on getting rid of linguistic blockers so people can get in there and feel that sense of agency and ownership over the code.
Hey, Rob. We're here with Chad. Rob's on one of our groups, so if you have any questions for Chad, we're going to be wrapping up pretty soon.
Sorry to get so late. I'm having some issues with my camera. I got a bunch of people in here doing some making.
Hey, everybody.
I don't have a lot of battery power on my phone, so I'm looking around for a cord. Anybody got an iPhone cord? No. So I do have a couple students, thank you, in here. I think Janotica was here earlier. Hey, Nathan, would you and Lamar be willing to talk about your experience with coding? Yeah, no. So come on, guys, you got to help us out here. So what parts of the Mozilla stuff did you guys appreciate or enjoy? Can y'all see them?
Mm-hmm.
X-ray goggles, yeah. What aspect of it did you find really cool about that? Yeah. So do you think us using Dreamweaver prior to going into Mozilla help you guys understand what to look for in the code? And yeah, so having a little bit of prior knowledge. Do you think it's necessary to have that prior knowledge to be able to use those tools, or? Yeah, so it's kind of easy to get around and make things happen without having that prior knowledge, but once you start building that, then it gets a little easier, right? Yeah, cool. Oh, here's Janotica. Janotica, you want to tell us a little bit about your Mozilla experience? Using the code or working with the Lego stuff, doing coding?
Oh, nice.
What about the Mozilla? Come on over. Huh? Oh, she's got to use the bathroom. Sorry. She got to go. She got emergency. So yeah, I've got a couple of guys in here who are working on some stuff now, and just a bunch of kids doing random things. Some coding, some not, and I've got a 3D print going on. So
nice. That's very cool.
And Rob, could you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Robert Puckett. I teach graphic arts at Rose High School, and I teach Adobe Visual Design, Digital Design, and Video Design. So I have a class now of digital design where we're focusing mostly on Dreamweaver. So they're learning code and kind of a WYSIWYG setting where you can go and manipulate code and see what happens. Almost like it's like a split screen, pretty much like the Mozilla tools. So they had some prior experience going into it. So it's very, very cool for them to see those tools outside of, like a proprietary software that they can actually go in and manipulate things and make things happen without having this expensive tool. So.
Yeah. Very good. Dreamweaver is good for learning like file structure too, and directory architecture and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're struggling through Dreamweaver. It's a lot of fun. We're learning together. I haven't used it in so long. I've forgotten a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of new things in there too. So.
Very cool.
So one of the things that I think comes up, and you know, that Rob's class is doing that most classes don't, is they're actually kind of messing with the code at a higher level. But like I'm going in later this week into a couple of classes to do Weebly websites. So, you know, drag and drop, create a website, bang, bang, bang. You have a very nice website in just a few minutes, really. And so, what do we say to students, or even to teachers, to help us think about why we should bother learning all these deeper aspects of coding when what you see is what you get is just so easy for anybody to do?
Right. So I think it goes back to that idea of like creative and personal expression, right? The WYSIWYG editors, it is very easy to create something that looks pretty good in a very short amount of time, but that's also shaped and delimited by the people who made it, right? And we know that the internet and the web play like this increasingly important and immediate role in our lives, largely because we get these slick interfaces and apps that make things easier for us. And, you know, why not? But as we go to the web for communication and entertainment and like personal matters, like banking or healthcare, when we use these services, I think one thing to keep in mind is the people making them are setting up limits and constraints and structures that we may not be aware of. And certainly corporations have gotten really good at looking at what we do online and at our behaviors and designing for those. And it creates this kind of closed system where if we don't understand the rules of the web and that people are making decisions about us using our data, we run the risk of just assuming that what we get or what we have is the way that the internet is. And it's not, right? I mean, civic engagement in the real world is all about realizing this isn't just the way the world is. We made it this way. We can make it different. And so helping people understand that the web is the same way. We made it this way. People are making it this way. And we can make it different. We can make it better in places where it might be harmful. We can make it more inclusive. We can protect our privacy and safety better while still building communities. Like, we can find solutions to the problems that maybe some companies don't want us to find in terms of keeping more of ourselves to ourselves or making choices about what we share, not just sharing everything as a default. So I think at the very least we should understand what's going on and who's doing it, so we make better and better choices for ourselves as consumers. And there'll be times when we're like, I will totally give this company this piece of information about me for this service because it's great and it's worth it to me. But there are times we're not even aware that choice exists, and we might not know what we're losing or what we're giving companies access to. So I think that's important. The other thing is like to continue to fuel a movement towards more open source work, and to keep people thinking about, you know, how do I make a service that does the same thing but doesn't require this information, and I can just share it with people. Like, to inspire the next generation of open source, we really need to help the generation coming up now understand, you know, the web is what we make of it. It's not just what we get or what we see on a device or in a store.
Thank you, Chad. And I think that that kind of is part of, too, what has been kind of a message we've had in the projects that we've been doing, especially that sense of agency and kind of your involvement in what you see and how you communicate and what you receive from that communication. So we really enjoyed connecting with you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us about Mozilla and some of the really cool hack the web features that they have. And we definitely recommend visiting teach.mozilla.org. I know we're starting to kind of institute some of these into our programming for intersections, and if you get an opportunity, you can always head over to our Remix, Remake, Curate website, as you can see here. So you'll be able to see some of the things that students are producing. Right now, a lot of them are posting their 6-word stories along with some of their breaking the code activities. And we really enjoyed having this opportunity to connect with you, and I'm sure everybody else has too. So I think this is the part where we say goodbye.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. It's been great. I will say if you have students who are like taking off, the one question I saw was about like where do people go next? The Mozilla Developer Network, which is it's almost like it's a technology wiki put together by a global community of volunteers, has something new called the Learning Area, and it has great self-directed, self-paced lessons in basic HTML, basic CSS. Great place to go for students who are kind of ready, maybe moving ahead of the class, or for people who want to, when they go away, look at this stuff more before they come back.
That sounds
All
awesome.
right.
Yeah, cool.
Well, thanks for coming out.
Thank you all. It was great talking with you.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chad.
guys.
You
All right,
Goodbye.